Hey,
Oh,
thanks so much
wonderful.
for the invitation, Greg. I'm so honored to be here and not only have a great conversation with you, but hopefully connect with some of your listeners and your viewers.
Yeah, no, fantastic, fantastic. It's a pretty interesting subject matter that we're jumping into that affects everybody. The whole mental health, a whole bit. So, you're a bit of an authority on this subject. But before we jump into that, maybe you can help us, our viewers, with a little bit of your background, Abe. Like, what led you, from I understand you had some early childhood struggles to take on of that and leading the flourishing workspace.
I know, thanks, Greg. One of the things I discovered early on in my life is that it was very difficult to separate the personal from the professional. And part of the reason for that is because, in the professional world, we're faced with challenges and stressors and relational, you know, team building and collaboration all the time. And those things actually are normal. But when you bring to that table perhaps some, childhood experiences like I did, or maybe even diagnoses that people are carrying, even diagnoses around depression or anxiety or who knows, right, manic depressive disorder, these things all kind of come into the cauldron of the workplace. Challenge with that, because all of that is normal, is that the typical team is not prepared to deal with that. And of course, the team leaders are trying to drive their business. They're trying to take care of their customers. They're trying to make sure they do right by their employees, but they also don't have the tools. And so for me, I began to notice in my own life and my own leadership that my own mental health issues were impacting how I was relating with myself, how I was connecting with the teammates, and really needed to step back and think, how could I create a safe, supportive, flourishing workplace? And that's exactly what we do with organizations today.
Okay. Yeah, the world is getting so complex these days. It's crazy. So I guess on the note that you just made, how do you actually define flourishing in the workplace, and how do you help clients achieve that?
Yeah, so this is a really important question because, you know, whenever you've been in a flourishing environment, you know it because the word flourishing just means it's growing. And growing is not so much quantity, but it's quality. So we like hanging out. We enjoy the people that we work with. We feel accepted, but we also feel like we challenge each other, that we can push each other higher, and that it's safe to do that. And of course, not only are we contributing, but we're also receiving, right? So I'm using my skills, I'm using my abilities, I'm contributing my thoughts, ideas, my creativity, but the person beside me, they're also contributing as well. On the opposite side, we can find, let's say, a toxic environment where it's very catty, where people feel like every single decision they make is second guessed, where they're micromanaged, where they're judged, gossiped about, criticized. This damages people. And I mean, it like literally damages people. So we're talking lawsuits, we're talking lost profit and productivity. But if you're that values oriented leader, you know that it damages the workplace because that's not the kind of culture you want to create. And you know that values oriented leader that that's not the kind of culture that will build your profit margin and the kind of group that you want to have anyways. Now, we do have, scientifically validated tools for measuring this, measuring your culture. Do you have a
Mhm.
flourishing workplace? But at a gut level, we've all been in them, flourishing workplaces, and we've all been in toxic work environments. And we know the difference because one leaves us feeling alive, like, man, today I did something that mattered. The other one sucks the life out of us and sucks the energy out of us. And so
Yeah.
our whole focus is helping leaders and team members to create that environment because every single one of us either adds to or takes away from that kind of a healthy workplace culture.
Okay, well, I guess I'm curious as to, without getting into the weeds on the how, but on a higher level, like how do you accomplish that for clients? Is it workshop
Yeah.
based? Is it tools? Is it lying
Yeah.
on a couch in your office?
Yeah. No couches in my office, but I will say that's against the policy, but for sure, I wouldn't mind one. What we start with every organization is a tool that we have. It's a scientifically validated tool. It's been used with over 1 million people, 20 different countries. It's called the Flourishing Life Questionnaire. And this is a scientifically validated tool where people then get an assessment, and it comes out with a 15 and 18 page report where you know exactly where you stand. Now that's Abe as an individual, Greg as an individual. Those results are only shared with that individual because we follow the strictest privacy guidelines. And you're not really sharing anything confidential anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. But just so people know that there's no chance that your HR manager is going to, sneak up on you. But even if they did, it's not like you're sharing your deepest, darkest secrets. Yeah. It's a scientific measurement of where are you flourishing and where are you not. And then we take all of the team members who have done this same profile, and then we aggregate them up. So now what happens is you get a picture. Let's say Greg has a team of 20 salespeople, and now we can see on a chart, here's how all 20 of us show up, not individually, but here's the aggregate. And now what we begin to see is, hey, we're doing great when it comes to collaboration and teamwork, and we've got a great sense of personal empowerment, but our conflict resolution is low, our emotional intelligence is low. And so now as a coach, an executive coach with that team, we've got data that we now present to the team, and we say, hey, here's what your results are showing us. Here's a plan to begin to bridge those gaps. And the bridging of those gaps happens both in group sessions, and this isn't time consuming. We're not looking for, a 2-week fix. We go over the course of a year. Often we have some customers, they've been with us for a few years, but we'll just do work monthly. And that's group coaching along with individual. And the idea is let's just follow the data. And the data always, and you know this in any business, the data tells the story, right? It's so much more than the numbers. There's relationships behind this. There's self-perception behind this. There's how we're treating each other behind this. And now what we have is a tool for meaningful conversation, but because it's de-identified, we're not pointing fingers, right? It's what kind of culture do we want? And it works. It's amazing to see when organizations take this process, it works. I mean, we've run this process through with construction companies, with law firms, with electricians, with accountants, with hairdressers. I mean, you name it, because every one of us, your work life is about half of the hours that you're awake in your life. You're on the job. So there's no one who can convince me that doesn't affect your mental health. You're working with a bunch of toxic people who don't respect you and care about you. And if that feeling is mutual, well, of course, your mental health is going to go down. And then, of course, that will impact the performance, the productivity, and the profit. And
I can see how when you stretch it out and do it over a long period of time, you take it from an event where people get hyped and wrapped up and it's great, and then a week later they forget everything. So I see the power of you stretching it out. So then the question I have is, you've come up with some examples, but maybe you can bring it down into a real life example. You shared the story about a restaurant that grew from one location under one of your leadership development programs. Maybe you can share that story.
Yeah, actually, I love that story because that's what I was thinking about when you said examples. So, we, my wife and I, there's a restaurant, and I'm not going to name any names, but we live in Calgary, Northwest Calgary. And so local restaurant opened up a few years ago, and we just like to go there, have breakfast and just hang out and talk. And we noticed at that time that there was a guy who was very present, very active, very engaged. The food was great. And so we started to get to know this gentleman. He was the owner along with his brother, and just kind of hanging out. And then eventually I was in there so much and meeting with people besides my wife. And he started to say to me, well, what do you do? He thought I was a real estate agent. And I said, no, I'm a leadership coach. We do workplace mental health. And he said, wow. He said, I've got a vision to grow to multiple locations. But he said, the most important thing is our culture. And so can you help us? And so we started working with his leadership team. And in the last 5 years, they have gone from one location to 9. They truly are a Calgary startup special. They have expanded into Ontario. They've got plans to expand into the United States. And they use both a sort of a corporate model, which is the head office would own and run a location, but then they also have franchising opportunities. And they've been able to roll out consistent culture. The vision of the owner was, I need to create bench strength. And so he didn't wait to have 9 locations and then start pulling his hair out saying, where's my leadership training? What he did was he was planning for that growth ahead of time. And that's what we were able to provide for him. And of course, most of his employees are people in their 20s and 30s. It's a restaurant. And we all know that generation is really under assault today when it comes to mental health. So they just love the fact that their owner cared and was interested in not just getting more work out of them, but also how do we create a flourishing environment for the team?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of businesses expand. And, the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges is maintaining the culture as you go into different areas, different locations. So if you've managed to have the process and the formula to get that done, I could see how powerful that is. So the question I have is this a cookie cutter approach, or do you offer a custom approach to each individual organizations?
Yeah, such a great question. And I will say that every situation is different. So there is a customized approach because, you're dealing with, different, you kind of have the laptop class today, but, working in a restaurant, you got shift work, you got people who it's difficult for them to come off the floor and sit around and sing Kumbaya. So what we do is we work with ownership or leadership, that whoever's in charge, and we kind of figure out what's going to work for the needs of your business. And I've been known to come with some who like, man, we got a night staff, so can you come in at 2 a.m. and train our leaders? Yep, I'm there. And we just figure those things out in advance. The bottom line is, it would be very sad to me to have a great product but not be willing to customize that to the needs of the business or the needs of the operation. So we do that all the time, not one size fits all. And so that's everything from the quantity, to the length, to the schedule, to the timing. Delivery can be in person, it can be online, it can be a combination thereof. We're very happy, and we have a whole team of facilitators as well. So quite a diverse group of facilitators who bring this message to different organizations.
Fantastic. Okay, well let's shift gears a little bit. That the series is Top Dog Tips.
Yeah.
So do you have 2 or 3 actionable shifts that leaders can actually implement this week to foster a flourishing workplace?
Yeah, I would say the first one is the recognition that you as the leader drive the culture more than anyone else. And culture is not just taught, but it's caught. And so the first action tip, and I hope it's helpful, is what are you modeling? If somebody was to come into that workplace and sort of look at what's happening, what's the culture that you yourself are modeling? What's the energy that you project? And, you don't have to be, Santa Claus. That's not necessarily the calling. The question is more intentionality. What's the culture that you want to create? And then making sure that you model it, because truthfully, in 2025, it's monkey see, monkey do.
The type of organizations that they're going to share with me are basically organizations from like 10 to 300 employees. And what makes that group ideal for transformation?
Well, the challenge, I think, in the larger organizations, and it's not that we haven't worked with them, but I will say that it's much more difficult to shape culture at scale in a massive organization like that, because the workforce is often so distributed. I mean, think of RBC, right? You're talking hundreds and hundreds of locations across Canada.
Yeah.
How you shape culture is by shaping the management team in each one of those locations and getting them on the same page. And then you've got the branches versus the regional offices versus corporate head office. You've got compliance versus IT, and all of those things. And so those things can be navigated, but it's much more complex. What I love about 10 to 300 roughly, is that you can still put your hands on that. You can still touch that. You can still make sure that you personalize those interactions. And, there is an openness. The mindset of somebody who's in a smaller organization, again, 10 to 300 is different than somebody who kind of goes in, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I've worked in those large environments, so it's corporate, it's a bit of a drone mentality. You just kind of show up, you do, you're a cog in the wheel, doesn't really matter. And you kind of just do what you need to do to survive. I get that. But in the smaller organizations, every person's contribution matters. You can have one person who can easily impact dozens of staff members based on the kind of atmosphere and culture that they project. And so our sweet spot has been that. Now we are working on a workplace mental health app, which is going to be beta version testing, is going to roll out for us in October of 2025. And we hope to be able to do some of that culture shaping through our digital devices. But the reality is we don't have any evidence yet to say that will be the game changer. And so we'll see how that goes. We're hopeful. But at least right now, we know that what we do in those smaller organizations works very well.
Yeah, I've worked for large Fortune 100s and smaller businesses, and you know what? I know where I fit, and I'm not a corporate cog. It's not who I am, and
Yeah.
although the posters on the wall talk about how I'm the most valuable asset they have, I just don't feel that way. So,
Yeah. And here's the problem. The problem for those larger companies is that, whether right or wrong, they do get caught in this virtue signaling vortex, I'll call it. And so what I mean by that is they have to, because of their sort of obligation to shareholders, pay more attention to their public relations than to actually what's happening with their people, right? Because as we all know, a bad news report can impact your share price, and one day you can cost you billions. And it just had to do with a news article. Whereas, that plumbing company of 40 people, not that they're not impacted by the media, but I can promise you they're not really interested in virtue signaling. Their interest is much more in, how are my people doing? Are they productive? That guy, who is a great plumber, how's he doing with his drinking problem? How's her family? How is the situation that could drive or take away from the sort of daily productivity? And if I'm the owner of that company or one of the GMs, I have to pay attention to that, because you can be the most skilled plumber, but if your own mental health is being impacted every day by substance abuse, anxiety, depression, you name it, that will hurt your bottom line.
Yeah, and the smaller organizations, you go from being a number to actually being a person who matters, and you get treated that way is gonna just elicit so much feedback and so much positive returns. So, okay, let's kind of switch you once again, Dave. I've got to know you a little bit, and you're a pretty awesome character, I would have to say.
Thank you.
How have your personal experiences shaped your approach to coaching and leadership?
Well, I would say the biggest thing is that, I've been fortunate to be at the executive level in both the for-profit and the nonprofit, and I've also been fortunate to be at the frontline level. And those experiences mean that when I'm working with a team, it is sort of a real world conversation. In my own life, my dad, as an example, drank himself to death. Alcohol, literally killed him. They found him in a pool of blood. He'd been dead for 3 days before anyone knew that he was alive. He abandoned, that he had passed away. He abandoned me when I was a kid. And so I found out about this about 18 months after it happened. The reason I say that is, my own brother has been in and out of prison and mental health hospitals. The sort of mental health conversation has increased in Canada in the last few years, but we still think about it as, well, that's kind of for messed up people. And, the reality is that it's for all of us, because either your mental health is perfect, and that's great, or you're working with somebody whose mental health isn't that great, or your own mental health isn't that great. And so at the end of the day, we're all impacted by this. And we kind of have to destigmatize it, right? We just have to normalize the conversation so that people don't feel weird about it. And so for me, talking about personal life, as I came to terms with, some of the family history and the legacy and all of that, I just began to then, my eyes were open, like, wow, that's why Suzanne at the front desk acts like this, or that,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like a judgment thing. It was just actually like an empathy thing. It was like, holy cow, she's a really good person, but she doesn't have the support, or man, he's a really good guy, but we as an organization have an obligation to help him. And what's interesting is that survey data shows this. I mean, 20 years ago, employees just expected that their employers would have a benefits program that would include physical health. But now they expect that employers will pay attention also to their mental health because it makes sense. And so, I think smart employers kind of do. They think, all right, if my people feel good, then they're going to function well.
Yeah, you're a wealth of knowledge and I imagine tools and resources to be able to deliver what you do for people. So maybe share what kind of free courses or ebooks or consultations can our viewers access to get started?
For sure. If somebody wanted to hop onto our website, it's called flourishingworkplace.com. And flourishingworkplace.com, we have a little section there, a tab that just literally says free resources. And there's a bunch of things there, from a couple of free online courses to some ebooks on things like knowing if 4 signs of a toxic workplace. There's some really positive ones like utilizing neuroscience to steer organizational change. And then, of course, there's always an option just to hop into a call with myself or a member of our team. I can promise you, sometimes when you say that, people get nervous. They're like, oh man, I'm going to get hard sold. For us, it's all about the relationship. And if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. We're not going to hard sell you, but we sure would love to just have a conversation, try to figure out, like, what are your pain points? What are you experiencing? You're probably doing a million things right, and you probably need a pat on the back for that because you're trying hard and you're making it happen. But if there's areas where you're noticing, some trends with your team, well, then let's drill in. And I will say, like, we're really affordable. Like, we're not trying to say, break the bank to care for your people. We're just saying, put it into the budget as a line item, and we'll work with you at a budget that works based on your capacity and your needs.
Again, that message speaks to the fact that you are on a mission to make an impact on people, corporate health, mental health, and such. And one of the ways that you are educating the workforce of bringing the information to people is coming up with your new video podcast series that's going to be released coming up in the fall. So maybe you can share a little bit about what is it, what's the intent, and what am I going to get from tuning into you?
Yeah, I know. I love that. What we're going to be doing, and it's such a great question, is, we wanted to do more storytelling, not so much, just telling people what we do, but let's share some of the stories of different organizations that have been positively affected when they go down the process of really trying to create a flourishing workplace. And so in the episodes, we're going to be talking to business owners, to leaders, to decision makers, just like many of your viewers. And they're going to be sharing some real world stories of how this focus on supporting building a healthy workplace culture has changed their organization, their team for the better. And, I guess somebody could say, well, it's easy for you, Abe, pie in the sky, but, what about my team? Hey, great. Let's let you hear from people who are, some of them still on the tools, some of them not. Every situation is different. But, if this doesn't hit us in the real world, then it's no good anyways, right? This isn't a laboratory. This is real life. And so we're so excited about that because sometimes, like, I am on a mission, and our mission is changing the world by changing the workplace, but you can feel a bit like a broken record. And then somebody comes along and they say, hey, this is what we did and this is how this impacted us. And it's like, oh man, that's beautiful. because it's another voice, kind of saying the same thing, but from a different lens.
Yeah, you're a parent. You know that sometimes that same message, same voice.
Yeah,
It's never hits home until somebody else says it. It's like, man, that's what I've been telling you.
it's maddening, right? But it's actually so true, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, excellent. Well, you know what? I think that's we're going to wrap things up. That's all the time we have for today. So, viewers, if you're interested about Flourishing Workspace, please connect with Abe and his team at flourishingworkplace.com. All the contact information is going to be in the notes coming through here. And remember, mental health is a choice. Anyways, awesome. So, hey, thanks a lot for coming to the show, and congratulations on your new series coming up. Really looking forward to it.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to share. And I hope that everybody listening to this really, really continues the journey. Thanks for the great work that everybody does, and you especially, Greg.